Hello to America, and since this will go to Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, I guess to the world, thank you for joining me on this very first episode. This is the Psychological Paradigm Shift Podcast. I am Ed Rieger, the creator and host. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope this information is helpful to everyone. No matter what I say or what topic we cover in this podcast, I am only motivated to help everyone understand more deeply what mental illness is, how it affects you personally, how it affects our society and our world. I am not a doctor, and I will never attempt to dispense any medical advice. Everything in this podcast is my personal opinion based on my experiences and research on this very complex and sensitive subject. I apologize in advance if anything I say or information I share hurts you in any way. That is not my intent. But I do believe that now is the time to have a frank and transparent conversation about mental illness and the power it has over our very existence. There's going to be a few quick housekeeping items before we begin. The podcast will always be free to listeners. If we ever have a sponsor that wants to support us, I will accept them to help cover the cost of the production. I will attempt to post the episodes weekly so we have consistency, and let's go ahead and get started. To start with, who am I? I'm an author and creator of the Psychological Paradigm Shift movement. Over the next few years, I will share my thoughts, experiences, and insights into mental illness and the effects on all of our lives, personally, socially, economically, politically, and spiritually. What's my qualifications? I was born into extreme, severe mental illness and have spent my life trying to understand and reverse the effects it has had on my life. I have worked over 30 years on this project, helping it to evolve to this point. I would do all I can to help others in pursuing to understand mental illness and manage the power it has over us. I believe there comes a time in everyone's life that it's time to give back for the blessings you have enjoyed. This is my attempt at giving back. I believe I have an obligation and a duty to my fellow humans to give back what I can before I exit this planet. That's what this podcast and movement is all about. Why do I call this podcast the Psychological Paradigm Shift? Because I feared for a long time that we as humans have been devolving, not evolving. When I look at the state of affairs in America and the world today, and the extreme divisions that separate us, the violence, assaults, military conflicts, personal, economic, judicial, political mayhem that's on our news stations 24/7, there's enough evidence to back up my concerns. I believe America and the world needs to go through a psychological paradigm shift to help us evolve to another level of our human existence. I am going to introduce 3 phases of the paradigm shift. I have written 3 books explaining in detail why we need to focus on the areas I am recommending that will make the greatest impact currently and long term. I will be taking direct action like this podcast to introduce the psychological paradigm shift, and I am providing tools to accomplish these goals. I will be introducing new laws for citizens and politicians to implement in the endeavor to inspire all of us in creating the future that our children and their children deserve. Let's talk about a paradigm shift. What is it? It is something we've all grown accustomed to being normal. And then one day, new information, new technology, or new social desires move us in a totally new direction. Here are some very famous paradigm shifts that we've experienced over time. We used to ride horses for transportation. Then we drove cars. We used to use landline telephones. Now we use iPhones. Only birds could fly. Then came the airplane. We used to own other human beings. Now we don't. Paradigm shifts changed the course of human existence. I think that is what this paradigm shift will do to our psychological evolution. Why do I believe mental illness needs to be talked about so bluntly and directly? I believe mental illness is the largest, most undiagnosed, untreated, misunderstood, most expensive disease we humans are afflicted with. I think mental illness and the behaviors and actions of the mentally ill can be very ugly, abusive, mind-boggling, shocking, and extremely destructive. And talking about it openly seems taboo. Mental illness for many is the wound that never gets healed. Communicating about it, educating ourselves, illuminating the truth about it is the cure. We have to bring mental illness into the 21st century. The APA, or American Psychiatric Association, estimates that over 20% of Americans will suffer a psychological illness in any given year. With over 300 million Americans, at 20%, that's over 60 million Americans. When you look at the world population being close to 8.2 billion, that's 1.64 billion people. That's a lot of folks suffering from a mental disorder. The other problem with this amount of people suffering from a psychological disorder is we don't know. Are they suffering from a mild, severe, or extremely severe disorder? How can you know if someone is suffering from a psychological disorder? Humans do not announce when you first meet them, I suffer from bipolar disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, or I am a sociopath. This is why mental illness is so destructive, abusive, confusing, frustrating, and because we know so little about it, and to this day we have no technology that can read someone's thoughts and motivations. It's a complete mystery at this point. Doctors are doing everything they can to cure, to learn more about it, but it's still a great mystery. Avoiding mental illness, not discussing it, not trying to recommend solutions to eliminate it, trying to label it as psychological health, is not solving the problem. Yes, you're being sensitive and woke, but we are not evolving. The mentally ill do not sit in dark rooms thinking about their issues. They must pursue their lives. They are us. They are family, friends, coworkers, churchgoers, romantic partners, politicians, and neighbors. Most people think of someone suffering from a mental disorder as the person on the street talking to an imaginary friend. There are those folks, but the majority of people suffering from a mental disorder are going to work every day, going to church, trying to date, and hoping to find a life partner. They are a boss, political leader, religious leader. That's why mental illness is so complicated and so very tricky to diagnose, treat, and eradicate. The majority of people I know who are suffering from a mental disorder will never seek treatment and will never admit they have a psychological issue. Mental illness is a thief of our personal and human potential. It steals your time, your life, and the potential of who you should have been or could have been. This is one of the main reasons why I created the psychological paradigm shift, and we will discuss this loss of potential in more detail in coming episodes. So, where did mental illness come from? How long have humans suffered from it? Is it inherited? Did you ingest lead as a child? Did you fall and now have a traumatic brain injury? Is the chemistry of your brain missing some functionality? Currently, the psychiatric and neuroscience community is doing everything in their power to figure out the causes and the cures. Unfortunately, today, none of it matters because the mentally ill must participate in our lives, communities, economies, politics, and religions. They do not come with labels on their foreheads stating, I suffer from schizophrenia, paranoid personality disorder, or I am a psychopath. So, we must educate ourselves to become more knowledgeable and aware of the power they will have over us when you're communicating with them. And communicating between humans is one of the most important actions we have every day. And if you're communicating with somebody who has been suffering either from childhood or from some traumatic event currently, from a psychological issue, it's difficult to communicate with them based on the level of severity. So I think communication, and as we go through the paradigm shift information in the future episodes, communication between ourselves as humans is going to be one of the biggest issues that you'll see is kind of common through everything in society. And when I introduce the first phase in the book, you'll see how communication becomes so critical. Now, the DSM-5, which is this book here, and for those of you who do not have YouTube, I just was showing it there, is the diagnostic manual of the psychiatric professionals to determine what disorder their patients may be afflicted with. There are roughly 65 categories of direct disorders with a few subcategories in each main category, giving us less than 200 disorders. Now, this becomes very important. With over 8 billion humans on this planet, you would think we should have at least 1 million disorders, or 10,000, or 500. That's why I think in human history, we have had very few biological mental disorders. A lot of our disorders are inherited from generation to generation to generation. And we're going to be covering a lot of that in the future episodes. But when you combine power with mental illness, you can multiply whatever disorder that individual with power has by millions and billions of times, depending on how many people whose lives they control. If you have a parent with a psychological disorder and they have one child, then they will only infect one child. But if they have 4 children, 6 children, 9 children, then they have just multiplied their effect dramatically. I believe it's the same way with larger groups. And if they are influenced by leadership suffering from a mental disorder, it's the same effect. But you take that effect out over the thousands of years of our human existence, and I believe that's why we are devolving. Because we've never addressed mental illness directly, large scale, as a human condition and shared medical issue. Because we never addressed it as a mass infection, in 2019, we had a pandemic, COVID-19. It infected hundreds of millions of people, and we had over 1.1 million confirmed deaths in the United States. We had over 67 million worldwide. If we hadn't found a cure, it would have been even more catastrophic. I believe that mental illness is a pandemic that's been with us since the beginning of our existence. It's never had a cure and never received large-scale treatment. So this has left us and continues to leave us vulnerable to the severe mentally ill who have power over us. They use that power to induce us into their psychological disorders. We become prey to their psychosis. The lies they will tell us, the destructive actions they will take against us, the abuses they will inflict upon us. Parents, religious leaders, employers, social leaders, and political leaders have the greatest influence over us. And when you combine their power, and if they suffer from a mental disorder and the fact that we have no tools currently to combat them and their effects on us, this is why we need a psychological paradigm shift. Let's look at what are some of the monetary costs of mental illness. Let's look at the size and scope of its direct influence. I believe mental illness is the most expensive medical disorder we have in America and the world. Let's compare it to some of the most common illnesses we have. Let's focus on the two largest diseases and the difference between them and mental illness. Cancer is the number one cause of death in the world. In the United States, over 600,000 Americans die every year. The annual expenses in the United States are $200 billion to pay for that care. The CDC reports that heart disease and strokes are the number one cause of death in America. Over 800,000 people die every year, and costs are $320 billion for that care. So when you combine cancer and heart disease, that's about $500,000 or $500 billion a year in cost. Now, I want you to get ready for a second to kind of think about what I'm going to show you as far as the cost of how I see mental illness affecting all of us. And the cost for psychological disorders are going to really shock you, stun you. And all these dollars are for trying to protect ourselves from the mentally ill, not abusing us, trying to oversee and manage the behaviors of the mentally ill, and trying to treat the sufferings of the mentally ill. All of these numbers are the most current I could research. I know I'm not even scratching the surface, but you'll start to get a picture of how big this is. Let's look at the military budget for the United States in 2025. It is $849.8 billion. Now, if you add the budget of the Veterans Affairs for hospitals and treatments, that budget is well over $1 trillion a year. Over $1 trillion a year. Then you have to add special budgeting for wars, like Iraq and Afghanistan. That costs us over $3 trillion. And who can put a price on the lives of soldiers and the innocent civilians in those countries and all the suffering that was created? To police the mentally ill nationally, from local and national law enforcement like FBI, on a national level for policing, we spend over $100 billion a year. And we spend $80 billion on incarcerations. For the states on policing, we spend over $135 billion a year. And for incarceration and the facilities, we spend $87 billion a year. We have millions of people incarcerated in federal and state facilities in the United States. Uh, I have no numbers on what the world count is on that. For alcohol, illicit drugs, sex, we spend over $740 billion annually. In indirect and direct cost, we spend $3.73 trillion for things like lost wages. We spend over $15 billion on foster care. So a lot of times when people are incarcerated, their children go to foster care. So that's an added expense to incarceration. In 2023 in America, we arrested 7.55 million people. And our judicial cost for all of that is $52 billion annually, and always increasing. In 2019, 44 million Americans were taking psychotropic medications. The cost for that was $106.5 billion. We have about 900,000 divorces annually in the United States. The divorce rate is well over 50%. And the average cost for a divorce is estimated about $12,000. But it can go into the hundreds of thousands, millions, and billions of dollars, which, if that's the case, with 900,000 at 12,000, then we're spending about $1 trillion a year on divorce. In 2020, or in 2024, I'm sorry, romance scams cost the United States $697.3 million. That's what was reported. A lot of romance scams never get reported. So what is that true number? Is it over $1 billion? Most likely. Annually, credit card theft costs the U.S. over $12 billion. And that's a small number based on, again, what is reported. How many people never tell anybody they got scammed and never try to pursue any actions? As you can see, we would be here all day trying to list all the cost of trying to prevent, protect, oversee the actions and ramifications of mental illness, with heart disease and cancer combined only costing us over $500 billion, and the combined cost of mental illness in the multiple trillions in direct and indirect cost. Mental illness is the number one cost for the U.S. And who could ever estimate what these costs are for the world? We have no numbers to try to put to it. So let's look at who this podcast is going to be for in the future. Anyone who's not afraid to think outside the box, who wants to look deeper into their own thoughts and motivations, who wants to communicate better and more intimately with their family members, friends, romantic partners. People are frustrated with superficial dating and want to create a long-lasting, loving relationship with a partner. It's for people who want to make a significant societal change that can have impactful long-term effects. It's for people who were born into mental illness and have struggled to understand why. Where did it come from? What can I do to overcome it and become more psychologically healthier? People are not afraid to tackle big, complicated, world-changing ideas. Journalists looking for a voice when it comes to communicating with political, social, religious, and economic leaders. And in the future, journalists will become a very critical part of the psychological paradigm shift. And we'll talk more about that in the future. And it's for the children who need guidance, hope, and a new way of looking at themselves and their fellow humans. Lastly, it's for psychiatrists and psychologists in America and the world to see the ideas I have and the actions I take and become advocates and participants in this paradigm shift. I will be calling on them throughout this movement to join me and assist me in implementing the ideas and laws I will be supplying. Also, the podcast gives a record of my thoughts, goals, and actions for future generations. So there's a record of it. Forever. Now let's talk about the three phases of the psychological paradigm shift. And I'm sorry, I think it sounded like faces. It's the three phases. So I apologize for that. In the first phase, I'm going to introduce the goal and objective of helping examine one of the main foundations of what I think mental illness generates from. We will be covering in full detail the first book of the series, How Not to Date or Marry the Mentally Ill. Now, if you don't have YouTube, I'm just showing everybody the book for now. So you get a picture of it there. In the book, I'm going to show where a large majority of disorders originate from and how they affect us on an extremely complex and personal level. Deciding to date or marry someone can be one of the, especially for one of the most important decisions a human being can make, especially for young people who need a totally different way of looking at dating and marrying when dealing with mental illness. I believe one of the most positive, impactful things a human can do is find a partner to share their burdens, joys, aspirations, and to walk through life with. But with a 50% divorce rate, and the top 5 reasons for those divorces being infidelity, addictions, lack of communication, lack of intimacy, and financial troubles, it is extremely obvious that mental illness is playing a very large part in relationship struggles and breakdowns. And in the next episodes, we're going to start digging into the book, and I'm going to start showing you some new ways of looking at dating and bringing dating into the 21st century. Our young people and all people deserve to reach for the bliss of a powerful and loving relationship. I will provide over 800 dating and relationship questions that I hope will open the lines of communication and intimacy that you can rely on in your attempts of creating a wonderful romantic relationship. In the second phase of the paradigm shift, I'm going to introduce the next step in beginning to eliminate a large number of mental disorders through educating our youth in a totally different way, bringing information to them from kindergarten up to the 12th grade. And I have a law for it that I'll be introducing and showing how we're going to accomplish this goal. In the third phase of the paradigm shift, I will take the laws that I am creating and I'll run for political office. My goal will be to show America and the world a new way to choose, support, and follow our political leadership. Democracy in America and the world must evolve, and it must inspire its citizens to do the same. To follow the progress of the paradigm shift and share your thoughts, you can go to my website, psychologicalparadigmshift.com. You can email me your thoughts, and in future episodes, I will try to share what I can and try to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for spending time with me. I hope this information was helpful. I appreciate you joining me through this journey, and I will try to make it as educational, interesting, inspiring as I possibly can. Thank you. Take care.